have to let the audience have a little chance to get their questions into you all. There are mics going around, and if everyone would stand up and speak your question into the mic, if you would, please stand up and give us your name.
Hi, my name is Erwin Cantor.
Hi there, Erwin.
Hello, Jen. I'm listening to Carol speaking in terms of density and how it can be best accomplished by going high-rise. I'm listening to Adrian speak in terms of climate change and the potential Armageddon if we don't indeed do something in terms of constraining urban sprawl by going vertical. I've heard Richard respond in terms of being obliged to include some degree of social housing, I shouldn't say social housing, affordable housing within his facilities. He's the only one who's really mentioned anything about social impact. If we do all this high-density construction, if we pack everybody vertically, what have we done to our social lives? How do these people relate to their community? We've seen earlier today stacks of seven-story stacks with office building and hotel and housing, or 5-story stacks where people never come down because they live 1,000 to 2,000 feet in the air. We seem to be so interested in our own profession, architectural and engineering, in terms of what we can do by going vertical. I ask of all of you, what can we do socially while we're doing all this vertical construction?
Okay, I'll answer. Erwin's on his hobby horse. Erwin, I was trying to suggest that there is an inexorable urbanization and modernization across the world today, and that we need to look at successful cities in order to see what is a livable density. It may not be 70,000 people a square mile as Manhattan is, but a lot of people like to live in Manhattan. I know you probably live in Manhattan too, right? You probably like it, and you probably think, as I do, that it could be somewhat improved by better parks, but I like it just fine. And I'm not saying that everybody has to live at 70,000 a square mile, but a lot of people choose to do that, and they love it, and they think they have a great, livable city. Maybe Chicago should be a little bit less, but Shanghai is going to be 70,000 people a square mile. It will be. It's inevitable that that's what it's going to be. So what I'm saying is the social is implicit in everything I'm saying. Mass transit, better public space, all of that is a formula that we have to understand how, as planners and architects, which I'm not, but a historian who can look sort of sensibly at the quality of the cities and say, what is vertical density, not the world's tallest building, not even 60-story towers, but what does vertical density look like? How do people live at that kind of urban extreme or medium high-rise and find a livable life? Because cities are not going to expand their boundaries. People are coming into cities. They're also procreating. There are going to be more people in cities. And if more people, like my husband and I, have one apartment and then we buy a second apartment, we've displaced the social life of someone else. This is an inexorable movement, urbanization, and we got to deal with it, just as we have to deal with climate change. So I'm saying, as designers, let's try to understand what density looks like and then plan better density.
Yeah.
Erwin, I was also talking about bringing schools into the city, providing places, parks in the city for children to play, talking about mixed use of buildings so that you have residential and office uses together, sometimes in one building, but sometimes next to each other. I think the social interaction could be much greater if you have a dense urban core, which is a 24-hour city, not a 12-hour city. And that's all about social aspects. That's all about it. And that's what we're referring to in the density study. One of the reasons we came up with the idea is that we discovered that residential uses in a building only use 1/4 of the, only emit 1/4 of the carbon that an office building does. So you can reduce the carbon emissions in the study area by putting more residential into it. And not only, that's just in the building, there's also the reduction in traffic and the increase in people walking from their place of living to work. And while they're walking to work, you get more people on the street, you have more social interaction. So I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Can I respond?
Yes, okay, one more. Are there other questions out there? Yeah, there's a couple more questions, so a quick answer.
Well, here quickly, I'd like to reverse your point and say that neither the Heritage nor the Legacy would have been built without Millennium Park. Millennium Park is a 25-acre park in the city. It's the largest green roof in the world. It's, there's 8,000 cars of parking under Millennium Park. It is directly across the street from our two buildings. Our buildings would not have been built without Millennium Park. The park came first, not the buildings, number one. Number two, we have a bridge that connects our building, the Legacy, from our building to the University Club. We all know that private clubs are suffering a bit right now, and several have closed in the city. So we put a bridge and we put all the squash courts from the University Club into our building, saving them a lot of money and a lot of square footage. Over 150 of the people who have bought condos in the Legacy have joined the University Club. We have 40,000 feet in the building for the Art Institute, the School of the Art Institute. So I think what I'm suggesting is, in the social realm of things, these buildings, well thought out, really are good for everybody. And it reminds me of one last thing. The building is over 1,100,000 square feet. In the whole building, there's only 7,000 feet of retail, and that's a little bit of retail on Wabash Street. And I really believe in that. I mean, I believe that my building should bring purchasing power and people to the city, but that those people should use the environment that already exists in the city. Our building does not look into itself. Our building looks completely out. I mean, if you want to buy a hot dog, a hamburger, a glass of water, or anything else, you got to go out of the building. You got to walk down the street. We've got a brand new grocery store coming 2 blocks away. There's an Ace hardware store being built on Wabash. There's cheese shops and so on. And by the way, the building will produce $175 million in real estate taxes in the 20-year TIF period of time. Chicago's the big TIF city. But we're in a TIF district, got no TIF money, didn't ask for any. But each building will produce $175 million. So those 2 buildings alone will produce $350 million of real estate taxes. And the purchasing power of the people that live in that building, those 2 buildings, is $100 million a year. So, I mean, it does all kinds of social good for the city. It's amazing what these towers can do for a city.
Okay, let's get
I'm
2
sorry.
more questions in, because we're running out of time. There was one down here, and then there's one back there.
Abbas, I'm Ian Mansur from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. I have a question for Adrian. The study that you've done, as well as other people who have tried to inform all of us about the potential dangers to the environment if we are not more sensitive to the environment, are really alarming. Do you think that, in addition to being a professional, very sensitive to the environment, and trying to produce buildings, design buildings that are very sensitive to the environment, do you think that people like yourself and other people in this room, as well as perhaps the organization, as citizens of the world, have a responsibility to maybe even, is there anything else that we can do to create that awareness in the rest of the world that these are very serious issues while you're trying to design buildings that are very effective? But the problem will not be resolved if all architects and engineers design buildings that are very sensitive to the environment. Burj Dubai is a very marvelous building. You want people, residents of the building, to be able to continue to drive their cars to the building and get into their apartments rather than ride their boats.
Well, the issue of what we design and build now is only a piece of the issue. It's statistically true that we can only replace about 1% of the existing building stock in any 1 year. And that's pretty proven out in this study that we did. Over 90% of the buildings are older than 1974. So it almost doesn't matter what we design as new structures per year. The biggest problem is all the existing structures that are out there. And I say it's a problem. It is a problem of renewal and regeneration of the city. If we don't do that, we can turn into places like Detroit. Sorry for those of you who are from Detroit, but that's a potential scenario in a Midwestern city. We also, if we don't regenerate and renovate these buildings, they do emit more carbon.
Let's get Richard, I'm sorry,
Sandy.
Sandy, let's get Sandy in on that, because that was kind of one of your themes, too.
Right, no, I agree. I mean, we oftentimes spend a lot of time thinking about the big solutions, the new construction, but reality is the problem is going to be solved by improving efficiency in the existing building stock. And that's where there are solutions, there are things we can do right now to cut 10, 15% of the energy consumption. With pretty quick payback that we can fund
All right.
even out of our own pockets.
Good, good. Okay, and then there was one question up in the back. Yes.
I am Pierre Alcogmani, University of Illinois, Chicago. I feel that we shouldn't really conclude this without pointing out that the scholars are really looking at vertical diversity as a controversial issue. Wide literature speaks to that, and the answer, it depends. It may work in some places, it doesn't work in other places. In Chicago, for example, right now, we are really risking, if we are thinking about going so vertical, we are risking what we've been doing in the past decade. We've been promoting Chicago as a livable, walkable city, sociable city, but when we make it really very dense, we are gonna risk whole quality of life spectrum. We are talking about expensive infrastructure, very costly place, it is exclusive, it's going to be security problem, fire problem, that's a trap. So vertical city cannot be really taken as a granted. Yes, it is a solution for every place. It could work some place, it may not work other places.
Now, one of the issues is how dense is dense, and how dense is too dense.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is in fact really critical to quantify it and then do the 3D master planning.
Okay, yes, that was I was trying to get this, there's a question in the back there.
Hi, I'm Rick
Wait.
Keating. I'm
there.
Rick Keating from Los Angeles. Hi, Jan.
Hi, we can't see in the back,
I know.
sorry about that.
I'd like to, first of all, commend Adrian, my former partner, for just a brilliant study. It's really the best thing I've heard in this conference. And I think the towers are wonderful. They touch our soul, like that Dan Burnham has always asked about things to do. But the planning is the real issue, and you're really getting to it right now. And I think Carol's point, as I come from Los Angeles and the state of California, where we don't have the luxury of that kind of density. We don't have transit. We don't have very good planning. We are the breadbasket of the world with that wonderful valley out there that produces so much. But we're about to lose it. And I think the point that was made about how can we find a way to not talk to each other about these issues, but to get at the media, get at the mayor in really significant ways to get rid of the NIMBY problem we have in this country. Because the other thing is, what's very obvious, the United States is not following the rest of the world at the level of quality of planning, transit, or high density.
Thoughts, panelists, about that?
I mean, my answer, my suggestion of the paper was to name it, to name vertical density as something which is good. That urban density is urban vitality. Yeah, infrastructure is expensive, but how can, that's Adrian's point, how can we afford not to have mass transit? How can we afford not to have public parks? There are going to be cities everywhere else in the world. America is not following the example because we're ahead in the evolution, but you look everywhere else in the world and people are flocking to cities. They're either moving there by choice or they're being moved there by governments, and you say, we don't have the luxury of government. I completely agree with you. I mean, my point is the governments make these decisions and maybe people make governments. So if we can find a way to recognize and identify the problems and pose a phrase, even if it's a phrase like vertical density, to take the pejorative out of it that we've heard in the audience.
Calling it the vitality index. You
Fine.
see?
It's fine with me, but
Something snappy.
but to me, horizontal density is congestion and crowding, and that's what density means to people. So maybe I don't care if you brand it with another word. I'm not invested in the word. I'm invested in the concept.
Right.
Rick, if I were you, I would move back to Chicago because if climate change and flooding doesn't get LA, the earthquakes will.
Right. There you go.
So get back quick.
All right, now we could definitely go on. We're already 5 minutes past the closing time, and so I think we will draw this fabulous panel to a close, and I want to thank our wonderful panelists with a big round of applause.